Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Stress Less, Accomplish More call. My name is Stephanie Matos. I'm a mindset coach here on the Brightly Thrive team, and this call is all about helping you achieve and accomplish any goal that you have your mind to, and also help you do it with a lot less stress. This is something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I love to talk about is the science of the body and the brain, habit transformation, all of the good things. So if you are watching the replay, I would love to have you join me live. If you're ever able to join me live, I host calls every single Monday and Thursday, and then once a month, I do host a call on Wednesday evening. And what we're going to do now is focus on a couple wins. We have a couple wins in the chat, so we're going to do wins first, and then after the wins, we'll talk about any questions, comments, concerns, challenges, any topics that you guys might like to cover. We had some really great questions in the last call. So I hosted a call on Thursday, and they were asking me about the subconscious mind and asking me about brainwave frequencies and asking me about accomplishing goals, utilizing both of those things. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that we can talk about, we don't have to talk about those things, but we can talk about something that's similar, anything that might be helpful for you guys on the call. Okay, so the first one we have is from Randy, and it says, great BRP last week. Epic, Randy. He actually explained to me what BRP meant. So I'm really, really happy for you about that. Sounds awesome. And then Rose is celebrating, just got through 3 weeks of state testing. And I told her that I could understand big time why she would be celebrating that as a win. And she agreed. And Roy is celebrating win is definitely being here now with the focus of well-being throughout my place of employment. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that so much. Thanks for popping your wins in the chat, you guys. I really appreciate it. And also thanks for joining me today. I so appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with me today. And so now that we've already covered the wins, what I would love to do is just take a moment just to open up for any specific questions, comments, concerns, challenges, all of the things that we brought up earlier. Is there anything in particular that you guys would like to chat about or talk about today?
I have a question, Stephanie. So just
Sure.
coming off of, state testing and actually interacting with lots of students who are
Yeah.
obviously super anxious. I usually work with elementary students, but I had time these past 3 weeks to also engage in conversation with high schoolers. I also have a daughter this is her first year in college. And I'm hearing a lot of the same things, even from my daughter. It's that mindset when a big test comes up or there's, you know, schoolwork or, I'm noticing that students are really overwhelmed. And the first go-to is, I can't do this. It's too much. I'm going to do bad. So is this negative mindset. I actually encountered a student in testing who was super nervous regarding the ACT. And as I was walking him to the room for testing, he's like, I am not smart, and I always do really bad on tests. And when I think I'm going to do well, when I get the results, I don't do well. And so it hurt me. It really hurt my heart. And so, I encouraged him as much as I could. I had him take a couple of deep breaths and just kind of, calm himself down. But it stuck with me. And I'm trying to figure out what is something that I can respond with that is helpful to them, to students, and that I feel like I'm giving them, not a tool. I don't want to lecture them or anything like that, but something quick, like a good bit of information that I can respond with that is encouraging, but something like a tool or something that's good for them that can help them during these times.
Yeah, I really feel for you and for the yeah, Roy saying great question. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Um, so what's interesting about this, you guys, is that I understand that you are working with a lot of kids, right? Of all different ages. And I can imagine that you're probably encountering, as Rose said, this particular mindset quite frequently. And so, with this particular conversation, and I will get to your question in a minute, I promise. With this particular call, right? This is really focused on you. right? So this is not focused on the students, and students are not my expertise. However, what is interesting is that when we help ourselves, right? I just heard a quote the other day that was like, the best thing you can do for me is help yourself, and the best thing I can do for you is help myself, or whatever. It's like vice versa, right? The best thing that you can do for me is help yourself, and the best thing that I can do for you is help myself, right? So as you continue to come to these calls, what's going to happen is that you're going to start to learn different tools, strategies, techniques, all kinds of things for stress management, right? So the stress less call, and just understanding how the brain works, understanding how subconscious programming works, understanding a thing called the expectation effect. I'll talk about that in just a minute, how that affects your outcomes, right? And so I think that, and I never really put two and two together with this, but I think as this call moves forward, and as more and more people start to connect on this call, and more people start to come to this call, and even as you guys start to come to this call more and more, I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be a trickle down effect where this really starts to help the students as well. There is so much research and science that shows that a lot of overwhelm and anxiety comes like it trickles down from the top down. So if someone up here is very stressed or overwhelmed, what happens is that everybody around them kind of gets stressed and overwhelmed. There is a phenomenon called spontaneous self organization. And basically, what that means is that like attracts like, or things start to synchronize with each other. There's a lot of ways in nature that this happens. And so what is really cool is that as you guys start to monitor and do things for yourself, this is going to have a huge impact on the students. And I think it would be really cool for us to just kind of put a little pin in this as something to notice, and see if test taking gets better. See if, as you guys start to handle things, because the thing is, life is just stressful. It's stressful for adults, it's stressful for kids. It's just this day and age is very stressful with social media, and comparison is the thief of joy, as you guys have probably all heard that saying. And guess what our kids are doing all the time? Comparison, like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on this thing that they're attached at the hip to, right? And so as the rise of social media has come up, there's some graphs that the research shows that it shows there has been a tremendous increase in negative thoughts, negative emotions, overwhelm, all of that kind of stuff, as well as perfectionistic thinking. Because guess what? Everything on here is glamorized and filtered and all of this kind of stuff, right? Which does not bode well with things like test taking, right? Because if we're expecting to have this perfect result, what happens is that the brain knows that perfection isn't possible. It's just not something that's possible. Now, you can get 100 on a test, or what have you, right? But generally speaking in life, perfection is something that is not an actual thing, because we're humans, not robots. And what the brain will do is, what's the point? I'm going to fail anyway. What's the point? I can't reach that perfectionistic level anyway. What's the point? What's the point? What's the point? Right? And so I actually, while you were talking, I have a friend who his job is actually working with students on test taking. This is what his business is. He's a former lawyer that just had a really big passion for helping kids, specifically with SATs, and all the way into college, like the LSAT and like all of that kind of stuff, right? And I had a conversation with him the other day, and I looked up a couple of research studies for him, which just so, and I didn't know Rose was going to ask this question. So I just so happened to have a little bit of information here. And what you just talked about with this student is a very fixed mindset, a very fixed way of thinking around a specific topic, which in this instance is test taking, right? And what the research shows is that a flexible mindset is much more beneficial for students, for their growth, and not only students but for ourselves as well. We can get a very fixed mindset as how other people are supposed to speak to us, how other people are supposed to do things, how they should have washed those dishes, how people should drive, how whatever. We have a very fixed mindset about certain things in our lives, and what happens is that it causes us a lot of distress. When we have a little bit more of an easy breezy or a flexible mindset, a growth mindset is what it's called. So there's a woman named Carol Dweck. And if you guys have never heard of Carol Dweck, she is the pioneer of this growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And she actually does quite a bit of study and content specifically on students or children, right? Growing up, how to give acknowledgement and praise without creating accidentally a fixed mindset, if that makes sense. So that might be something. So again, I'm not an expert on this. However, I do know a little bit about this, specifically more so in adulthood. However, she does have a whole plethora of information on anywhere from preschool, like young children, all the way to college age that I think might be cool for you guys to look up. Again, her name is Carol Dweck. And however, what is interesting that I found is that uh, fixed, so the students who had a growth mindset or who have a more flexible mindset, and what that means is like, even if you have a bad grade here, they know that that does not mean that they're going to have a bad grade here. A fixed mindset would say, oh no, because I have a bad grade here, that means I'm just a horrible test taker. I'm never going to do well. And that's what it is, right? So it's kind of that more concrete way of thinking. And it says here that students that have a growth mindset have 7.3% higher than average grades, right? And those who have a fixed mindset have a 4.4% lower than average grade, right? So, as we can see, having a more flexible mindset around your belief systems is significantly just across the board better for everybody, including ourselves. What you just said was incredible, which is you had them do some deep breathing, all of this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not sure how this could come into play because I know you guys have a lot on your plates, and I know that it's probably challenging to fit in extra things into the students' already full plates and your already full plate. However, there is this thing called the expectation effect, which is a well-researched phenomenon, if you want to look at it like that. And basically, whatever you expect to occur is more likely to occur, whether it's good or bad. So if I have a belief system like the student was saying, I am horrible at this, I'm not good at that, I'm not smart, blah, 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 blah. What that shows is that they have an expectation that they're going to fail, which then they most likely are going to do bad because anytime your stress levels are really high, what happens is that your brain can't access information, even if you know it already. An example of this is if you've ever been in an argument or a tiff with someone and then you go home after this interaction or exchange, and then you go, I forgot to say this, I forgot to show this receipt, I forgot to bring up this website, I forgot to show them this video, and that's because in the moment your brain gets so flooded with stress hormones that you literally are blanking out. Or if you've ever had a student literally blank out, this has happened to me before where, this actually just happened to me just now. I got asked a question about something, but I wasn't prepared for it and I wasn't expecting them to call on me. And they were like, Stephanie, what do you know? What do you think? And I was like, oh no, I don't know what I think because I totally was not expecting you to call on me. So I think that just the sheer like stress volume came up and deleted my memory of something that should have been, fairly easy for me to answer. And so, what we want to understand is that if we can reduce stress levels in the students before the test taking begins, and maybe that means, telling them to focus on 5 things. What do they see? What do they smell? What do they taste? What can they touch, right? How does this feel? What does it smell like? Do you have some essential oils or a candle? Or, maybe you have some water, take a sip of water. Like eliciting their 5 senses will get them back in their bodies, right? And not in the mind. So tactile things that get them into the present moment can really help. Deep breathing can really help with alleviating that brain fog from the stress hormones, just eliciting that relaxation response. And then if you can start to teach them little bits and pieces here and there, just planting the seeds that their brain is extremely powerful, and whatever it is that they tell it, it's what it believes. So I and I am statements are like basically commands to the subconscious programming. So if I say I am not good at testing, your brain will start to focus on all of the things and all of the details that make you not good at testing. So, like, let's say if I have a little stumble in something that I'm like, oh man, I know this and I can't remember. Instead of me being like, oh, but I remember things so easily, let me just keep focusing on it, or I'll skip this one and come back to it. It'll come to me. What it will do, your brain will go, see, you're a bad test taker. See, this is what you said. See, and it'll start to gather up evidence that it's right, if that makes sense. And so we really want to be careful with I and I am statements. And so if you can start to have them saying a couple weeks before the test, I'm a great test taker. I'm very calm in tests. I am able to learn with ease. I am a very smart person. I'm a smart individual and I can figure things out. What will happen is that over time that starts to install and it'll start to become their set point, but it takes some time to do that work. It takes some time to kind of install that. And unfortunately, right before the test, when they're like a 10 out of 10, anxiety probably isn't the best time for them to start to learn these things. But if you can learn it before, and then you can say, remember when we said last month that there's an expectation effect? I want you guys to remember that in your tests. Remember when we said last month that sometimes when we get very, very stressed, our brain deletes? One of the things that can stop that is simply deep breathing, focusing on your cute puppy at home, or focusing on the fun thing you did, or focusing on the times when you thought you couldn't do something and then you did anyway, right? So some of this takes a little bit of pre-work. Some of it can be done on the day of the test. However, overall, I think what's important is that there's this united front that is helping the students evolve into a growth mindset. And the cool thing is that when people are young, they can do a lot of great things in their brain. It's once we get to like our older ages that it becomes a little bit more challenging to change neurology. But knowledge is power, man. Knowledge is so much power. And what's interesting is one of the studies that was done on that expectation effect was actually done on students. And what was interesting is that it was the teachers that they did this study on. And so they had two different cohorts, and one cohort they were told your students have tested average IQ. We don't really expect them to increase IQ, right? The second cohort was told, wow, we tested your students and they are above average across the board. We really expect them to just excel and increase their IQ. And so what happened is that the teachers, because they believed this, because it was Harvard researchers that did this, but guess what? They didn't test anybody. Everybody was the same. There was no special students, there was nothing done. They just told them this. And because these teachers had an expectation that these students were special and were going to increase their IQ, what happened was that they treated them differently. They talked to them differently. They took a little bit extra time than they may have otherwise than these students, right? So we're just like, oh, okay, this is just what it is for you. This is just how it is. So if these students maybe were having a little bit of trouble, they're like, wait a second, but you're supposed to be really, really smart. So let me just take a little bit of time to explain that a little further, right? So they told them they were incredible, told them they were smart, told them that they were expected to succeed, told them that even if they had a little slip, it was okay. That was part of the process. It's all right. And then what happened was that this cohort did indeed, by the end of the year, have a higher level IQ, and this one didn't at all. And so we want to make sure that we are speaking what we want into individuals as well as we do into ourselves. Again, I started this out by saying one of the best things that we can do for others is to help ourselves regulate our own emotions, regulate our nervous system, regulate our overwhelm. And then what happens is that it starts to have this trickle down effect. And the expectation effect study, that was indeed what happened, was that it was actually a trickle down effect that happened that affected the student's IQ. Let me see this. I'd love to respond to this question. Oh yeah, sorry, Roy, I didn't even see that. Yes, 100%. And then Rose says, thank you. Your response helps me understanding and gave me something to start with. Love that. Go ahead. I would love to hear what you have to say, Roy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
Stephanie, thank you for your response. That's my practice from the past 20 years is just really looking at ultimately what I can control, which is just my own self. And taking care of myself is the first and foremost practice for what we can do to support other students when they're going through it. Because then we have a base that they can connect with. And that's that trickle down effect. So I love that. And I love Carol Dweck. And one of the things in sharing with my students throughout this year about growth mindset is really focusing in on the learning process. And that in the learning process, there's a point in the learning process where we don't know, where there's just, you don't know that concept or that thing. And that's just part of it. And getting students to understand that that's a big part of the learning process is you don't know sometimes, and that's okay. That's where we get information on what we need to learn about and where we need to put our energy and focus into. And then that, of course, in the learning process, we make mistakes, and sometimes we experience frustration, and that's all part of the learning process. And really putting that forward for the students to really focus on the learning process rather than results takes that stress of, oh, what if I do horribly on this? Well, it's just part of the learning process. That's all we do. And then, Rose, I love that you had the young man breathe and really connect to himself. And what I really share with the students in the proctoring of the tests is, hey, this is just one moment where you get to just go out and do your best. And your best is whatever you can do right now. The results really don't matter. This is just where you're at right now. And that's all we're doing, is just focusing on what you know, what you don't, and learning from that. And so stay focused, and just inviting them to stay focused on doing their best. Because that's that, again, that reprogramming the brain to think I can do it rather than, oh, I'm no good at it or whatever. Just do your best. And whatever your best is today, that's great.
Yeah, I
And
love that. And it removes the fear of failure. So
yeah,
I got really blessed to meet Esther, and her last name starts with a W, but she's like the godmother of Silicon Valley. I can't remember. She has a last name that's kind of challenging to spell and also say. But one of the things that she did in her classroom, so she has the highest number of CEOs, CFOs, people in Silicon Valley, like all of that went through her simple education system. It wasn't anything special. And actors, actresses, all these kind of things that are just high achievers. And one of the things that she really focused on was helping them understand that it's okay if you make mistakes. That big red F or the big X or whatever it was, a lot of times what will happen is that they internalize that, and then they're afraid to try things. They're afraid to mess up, afraid, and I think if we could kind of make these things, and now what's funny is that I only work with adults, right? However, when she was talking about her students, I'm like, oh my goodness. Yes, for adults, I think we also need to be a little bit more conscious of our fear of failure or getting it perfect or right. And her example was, every time I've written an article for Time Magazine, never once has the first iteration gone into the publication. It's gone through many different revisions and edits and all of this kind of stuff. She's like, so why would I expect you to be perfect? And I think what it does is it just takes the pressure off. And I know there's a fine line because obviously they need to make good grades, so I think there's a fine line, and I'm sure you guys are, kind of teetering on that line all the time of understanding that there is an expectation for success while also kind of making them feel comfortable that it's okay if you don't know it today, maybe you'll know it tomorrow. And if you don't know it tomorrow, keep trying, you'll get it eventually. And just having them not feel so stressed about these outcomes. And again, I'm not an expert at children or children's psychology or anything. I want to make sure that is abundantly clear. But what's interesting is that a lot of things that happen in kids and teens and young adults are the same exact things that I deal, I'm dealing with people who are much, much older than them and even in their 50s and 60s, right? So how cool is it that you guys can actually have an impact on some people's mindsets so young? Because the thing is that they might roll their eyes at you. They might not want to breathe. They might not want to do this, but I tell you what, it's getting in there. And when they're in their 20s, they're going to go, I remember when Miss Rose said this and I was so annoyed, but I use it every day. Or when Mr. Roy or whoever, Randy said this or that, this is the thing, is that keep saying the same things over and over again, and eventually these things will blossom and bloom. You're placing seeds that you don't know when they're going to change these kids' lives, and that's I give you guys a lot of credit for that. This is a very interesting time of life to be a young adult and a young child, you know. And so I think that it's incredible that there are people like you who care so much that on this call, which is actually for you, you're asking questions about them. You know, that really shows the character, you know, your character. And I really want to give you a lot of props for that and honor you for that and say thank you for that. I really appreciate that a ton. And then the only other thing that I was going to say is, and we might run a few minutes over, just to be, I want you guys to be aware of your time, because I don't know if you guys have other meetings, but um, one thing that I wanted to say is that there is a lot of research around optimist versus pessimist. So optimistic thinkers versus pessimistic thinkers. And optimistic thinkers across the board have better everything. I mean, better health, better wellness, better happiness, more success, better grades, better jobs, better friendships. I mean, just across the board, everything's better. And so that could also be something that you start to instill in their mindset, is this idea of optimistic thinking in the face of, so what optimists are able to do, it's not that everything's always perfect, it's that they're able to see the silver lining around every cloud, right? So when the clouds come, they're able to see these silver linings. What pessimists do is that they spiral down further and further. So that if we can stop that spiral, that can be hugely impactful for mindset resiliency, building resilient people and humans, you know, which is so incredibly important. And then the only other thing that I would also say is that there is so much power in visualization. If you guys can even do a little quick, I mean, even if it was like 2 minutes of visualization where it's like, just breathe a little bit, close your eyes, and I just want you guys to visualize having an amazing outcome, having an awesome outcome, and handling whatever comes your way with ease or whatever, and just having that power of visualization and lighting up the right neurology. Because what they're lighting up right now is, I call it doom, gloom, death, and destruction, right? It's like everything that could go wrong will go wrong, but that's a pessimistic way of thinking, right? Everything that could go right will go right, and I can handle anything that comes my way. I am a very resilient person, and I have awesome people who care about me and love me and want me to succeed. So if something doesn't go right, that's okay. We can figure it out. You know, does that help you guys? Does that help?
I think it's
Focusing
great.
on, so what Rose said here, yay, thanks, Rose. Focusing on the actual learning process is a great way to reframe the experience. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so this is something that unfortunately, when you're in a heightened state, it's very, so never in the history of telling somebody to calm down have they calmed down. Okay. And that's because usually by the time you're actually telling somebody, okay, let's calm down, you know, they're already so far off the deep end that it's hard to reel them back in. That's why some of those body practices where they're like, you know, kind of doing alternating things or doing breath work or smelling essential oils or whatever they have access to, or tactical things can bring them back into their body so that their brain can get back online. Yeah, of course, I can answer that in one moment. So if you could do this ahead of time, so even deep breathing, what the research shows is that if you do deep breathing when you don't need it, it works 10 times better when you do, right? So some of this is kind of just like sprinkling these things in the little moments, and you know, here and there, that really is when it starts to make the difference. Go ahead, Roy.
I love that. And I love your optimistic, pessimistic conversation as well, because it really is growth mindset, fixed mindset. You know,
Mhm.
when we're optimistic, we know we can learn from anything. That's growth mindset. When we're pessimistic, we think whatever the results are is just how it's going to always be. So
We get an
thank you.
extreme tunnel vision.
Yeah,
So when you get overwhelmed like that, you get tunnel vision. It's like you're seeing through a straw. Only the straw, the only thing it can see is everything bad,
yeah.
right? And so
That's
what we
yeah,
want to do is open up the consciousness through the
yep,
breath, through tapping into the
yep,
body again, you know, all of that kind of stuff, because words don't penetrate when they're in that state. So you're like,
yeah,
you're awesome, you can do it. It's like, no, I'm not, no, I'm not. And they're
Yeah.
certain of it, but that's because they're tunnel visioned on that outcome. You guys, we can keep talking about this for a lot longer. I've got to hop to my next call. We're
Uh,
already like 3 minutes over. Thank you guys so much for staying a little bit over with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for all the questions and for just all of your insights. I really appreciate it, you guys. I'll be back again on Thursday of this week. So hopefully I'll get to see some of you guys again. And if not this Thursday, maybe on Monday of next week. All right. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here with me. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you very soon. All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.